You can tell the moment a room changes, not from what anyone says, from something much smaller. A door closing harder than usual, a pause before an answer. You knew who was upset before you had even sat down. Everyone else was still taking their coat off. People call it intuition. They call you observant. They call you sensitive. Some of you have been told it is a gift. It is none of those things. It is a skill. Most of you learned it very young, younger than you can properly remember. You learned it in a house that required it. You did not choose to learn it, and nobody taught it to you on purpose. And one thing needs saying before anything else. Learning it was never your fault. Let me say that properly, because it matters more than the rest. If you grew up watching somebody's mood to stay safe, that was not your fault. You were a child. Children do not choose their houses. You did not cause it. You did not deserve it. You were not too sensitive, and you were not difficult. You were doing exactly what a young mind is built to do. It looked for whatever kept you safest, then got very good at finding it. A child in that house has one job: stay safe. Most of you did that job well. Nobody ever told your mind when to stop doing it. So it kept going. It is probably still running now. And it did not have to be one big terrible thing. That is the part most people get wrong. Some of you had something obvious, something with a name. Being hit, being screamed at, being touched when you should not have been. Others had nothing you could ever point to. A parent who drank, a parent who was ill and could not be reached. A house where the money ran out and the mood turned. Somebody who was there but never really there. Researchers now sort these into two rough kinds. One is threat, where something frightening was present. The other is deprivation, where something needed was missing. Threat is the shouting and the fear. Deprivation is the silence and the nobody came. Both shape a child. They simply shape different things. And here is what almost nobody says out loud. The quiet kind counts too. Plenty of you have spent years deciding yours was not bad enough. It was. So how does that show up now, 30 years later? You read faces faster than you read words. You walk in and something arrives before any thought does. Somebody here is upset. You are rarely wrong. You often cannot say who or how you knew. The feeling gets there long before the reasoning does. You apologise before you know what for. Sorry comes out first to bring the temperature down. That is not politeness, and it is not low confidence. It is an old strategy for becoming smaller than the problem. Small things are less likely to get hit. You are calm in a real crisis. When something actually goes wrong, you are useful and steady. Then an ordinary Tuesday arrives and something tiny undoes you. A short reply, a changed plan, a face you cannot read. Emergencies feel familiar. Ordinary calm does not. That is the part nobody warns you about. And you cannot rest while somebody nearby is annoyed. Not your annoyance, anybody's. The whole house has to settle before you can settle. You will fix a mood that was never yours. None of that was a decision you made. Every part of it was something you learned. So what actually happened? The research here is very specific. Children who grew up around anger were shown pictures of faces. The faces shifted slowly from one expression into another. Everyone spots anger eventually. That is not the interesting part. These children spotted it sooner than the other children did. They needed less of the expression before they were certain. Their brain responses to angry faces were stronger too. Not to sad faces, not to happy ones. Angry ones in particular. Sit with that for a moment because it changes everything. Your mind did not become broken. It became faster at one thing. It built a detector, and it tuned that detector for anger. That took time, attention and repetition to learn. It was work done by a child without any help. And the work paid off. That is why it is still running. Which raises the obvious question. If it worked so well, why is it so exhausting now? Because a detector cannot tell that the house has changed. Think about a smoke alarm for a moment. A good one learns the difference between real smoke and steam. One fitted where fires actually happened learns that very fast. It becomes excellent at its job. But it has no way of knowing the fires stopped years ago. Nobody arrives afterwards to reset it. There is no engineer for this, so it keeps working perfectly, in a kitchen, at dinner. That is what is happening when a quiet room exhausts you. Nothing is wrong with the equipment. It is set for a house you moved out of long ago. And understanding that does not switch it off either, which is why what people tell you rarely helps. You're overthinking it. That is the most common one. But overthinking means adding thought where none was needed. This is not added. It arrives on its own, already finished. You're too sensitive. That is the second one. Sensitive suggests something faulty in the instrument. The instrument works, it is simply set very low. Why can't you just relax? That one is meant kindly. But relaxing is not a decision anybody makes. It is what happens when a detector stops finding things. So none of it lands and you feel more alone with it. Then there is the fourth thing people say. It sounds the kindest of all of them. It is the most wrong. You have been told the hardship made you stronger, wiser, deeper, better at understanding people. Researchers have a name for that. They call it post-traumatic growth. More than half of people who survive something terrible do report it. But when researchers checked those reports carefully, a problem appeared. People who said they had grown often did not seem changed to others. The people closest to them saw less than was being reported. Most of these measures ask you to compare yourself to a past self. A past self you cannot see clearly anymore. One careful review reached an uncomfortable conclusion. The feeling of having grown is very common. Real, measurable growth turns out to be rare. And believing the comfortable version has a cost. People who chase growth often skip the grieving that recovery needs. So here is the honest version, and it is kinder than it sounds. Something real did change in you, and it was clever, and it worked. But it was not a gift. You did not need any of it to happen. You are allowed to have simply survived it. That is enough. So what do you actually do with that? 3 things help. The first is naming it in the moment. When the feeling arrives, say quietly to yourself, that is the detector. You are not arguing with it. You are labeling it. Labeling turns something automatic into something you can look at. That small gap is where everything else becomes possible. The second is checking the evidence gently. Ask yourself one question. Is anybody actually angry? Or is it just quiet? Most of the time now, it will just be quiet. You will be wrong sometimes, and that is fine. Ask anyway. The third is catching the reflex apology. When sorry starts arriving, pause for one breath before it does. You do not have to stop it. Just notice it happening. Noticing is the whole exercise. Nothing more is required. None of those 3 will fix this on their own. There is a fourth thing, and it does more than the other 3 combined. Tell one person. Out loud to an actual human being. Not a comment. Not a note in your phone. A person. This gets much heavier when it is carried alone. Saying it once out loud changes what it weighs. And if it is sitting heavily right now, please speak to somebody properly. A doctor or a therapist or one person you already trust. Therapies exist that work well for this. You do not have to manage it alone. The detector will not switch off tonight. Anybody promising you that is selling something. But it stops being who you are. It goes back to being something that happened to you. An alarm that survived a fire is not a hero. It is just a good alarm in a house that is finally quiet. You are not broken for checking. You do not owe anybody a story where the worst part made you better. Go and be somewhere safe on purpose tonight. If someone came to mind while you watch this, send it to them.